What's up, friendly neighborhood nerds? Thank you for watching our video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell.
Faster than a speeding bullet.
I'm Marjorie Liu and I freaking love comics.
Hello, I'm Chris Claremont and I freaking love freaking comics. You got a problem with that?
Yo, my name is Donnie Cates and I know the brand is I freaking love comics, but I fucking love comics.
Comics, movies, TV, video games, anime, your powers combined. I freaking love comics.
Edward Blake is murdered. Rorschach figures out that Blake was the comedian. He thinks someone is killing off costumed heroes. He warns Daniel Dreiberg, the Night Owl, John Osterman, Doctor Manhattan, Laurie Juspizik, the Second Silk Spectre, and Adrian Veidt, Ozymandias. After a comedian's funeral, Dr. Manhattan is accused on TV of causing cancer in his friends and colleagues. He responds by leaving Earth for Mars. This causes tension to rise between the US and Russia. Someone appears to attempt to assassinate Ozymandias, and Rorschach is framed for murdering a supervillain named Moloch. He's captured and revealed to be Walter Kovacs. Silk Spectre starts hooking up with Night Owl and they fight crime together. They decide to bust Rorschach out of prison. Manhattan teleports the Silk Spectre to Mars. He explains why he no longer cares about humanity. She realizes the comedian tried to rape her mother and is probably her dad due to the consensual relationship they formed after the incident. This conversation causes Manhattan to reconsider his investment in humanity. Night Owl and Rorschach continue to uncover the conspiracy. They suspect Ozymandias is behind everything. Rorschach is documenting his investigation in a journal. They confront Ozymandias at his Antarctic lair. Veidt explains his plan to save humanity from nuclear war by faking an alien invasion in New York, which will kill half the city's population. He hopes this will unite the superpowers against a perceived common enemy. He also reveals that he murdered the comedian, arranged for Manhattan's associates to contract cancer, staged an attempt on his own life, and killed Moloch. Night Owl and Rorschach are disgusted, but when they vow to stop him, he reveals that he did it 30 minutes ago. Defying the villain tells the plan trope by executing the plan first, then revealing it. It's a really cool part. When Manhattan and Justibic return to Earth, they see the gigantic squid monster that Ozymandias created, dead in the middle of the city. Manhattan notices his power being affected by tachyons emanating from the Antarctic, and the pair teleport there. They discover Ozymandias' plans and confront him. Ozymandias reveals that the plan worked and global hostilities have ceased. Everyone decides to keep it on the DL, except Rorschach, but Manhattan kills him. Manhattan then links up with Ozymandias, who asks him if he did the right thing. Manhattan says nothing ever ends before leaving Earth. Owl and Spectre go off the grid and change their names, and it's heavily implied that the New Frontier newspaper will print Rorschach's journal. Well, there you have it, guys. That's the story of Watchmen. Man, I really like this. I really like this graphic novel, and it's really groundbreaking. The thing that really kind of comes to my mind when I read it, and I mean, we're going to really get into the weeds here, but I wonder, what is a hero? The Watchmen itself challenges the concept of what a hero is, what a villain is, and I feel like that's really obvious with Ozymandias and how he's done a terrible thing for a good reason and potentially saved even more people's lives, because he confirms with Dr. Manhattan in the end, like, yeah, look, hostilities are subsiding between the USSR and the USA. So he saved like billions of lives, but he also murdered millions of people. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
There's a lot of examples of that with all the characters, right? Like you could say that with Rorschach, he maybe does more harm than good, and the comedian maybe does more harm than good. But it's difficult to measure because it depends on how you value life and all that fun stuff. What do you think, Robo?
Yeah, for me, I think it has a lot to do with intent, right? Like, what is the real reason why you did a thing, right? And I think the example I used when we've BS'd about this before is, if I shoot a gun at you and I intended to kill you, but I missed and I killed another dude trying to kill you too, because in this universe, everyone's trying to kill you. Like, are you thanking me that I saved your life, or and I only had one bullet? No, you're like, okay, I'm glad that worked out, but fuck you anyway. And so Ozymandias, when he gets rid of Dr. Manhattan at the end, and you start really understanding that from a child through his life that he just really just wants to be the best. Does he really want to save the world, or is that a byproduct to his ego? And at that point, if I know that you killed, however many millions of people to stop nuclear war, by the way, you could have just asked Dr. Manhattan to do that his damn self. What was the point really? And okay, good, it works out. If you don't read Doomsday Clock, it works out, and but he's
So
still
there's two
in my head.
There's two schools of thought when it comes to ethics. There's the intuitivism, and then there's there's utilitarianism. And with utilitarianism, it's everything you do is results based. So you do a good thing, that's virtuous. You do a bad thing comes from what you did, that's not virtuous. So it's a matter of the impact and the results of whatever actions are carried out. But with intuitivism, it's mostly focused on the intent. You tried to do a good thing and failed, that's still good. You tried to do a bad thing but failed, you're still bad. And I feel like, personally, the way I answer those questions of what makes a virtuous man or what makes an evil man is somewhere in between. It's almost like an amalgamation of the two. And with
So to boil
Ozymandias,
that down, would an example be like, are the ends more important than the means, or vice versa? Is that what you mean by those two schools of thought? Or
personally, I think that definitely falls in that paradigm, and that's definitely a question that can be answered by debating those two schools of thought. With me, I would say the ends and the means are both very, very important. I would not discount either. However, I think there are circumstances where you can make moral and ethical sacrifices on the means to achieve good ends, and then I think there are some circumstances where the ends are not worth immoral means. So it's a case by case, and you have to kind of parse it with other underlying ethical principles of greater good, greater happiness, and that's kind of how I would arrive at that.
Which character would you say is the most heroic?
Ooh, man, that's a good question.
I still haven't figured that out. I did think about it. I'm like, they're all kind of shitty.
Impulsively, I want to say Night Owl. That's the one that I want to say.
Night Owl 2?
But Night Owl 2, yes.
Yep.
Although Night Owl 1, I would also say was virtuous. But
Sure.
Night Owl 2, and that's really coming from the intuitivism perspective, because he definitely tried really hard to be a good guy,
Right.
while accomplishing, compared to Ozymandias, very little. So, yeah, I would say he's the most virtuous person. He's the best person. I would not necessarily say he was the most heroic.
Interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I would say my answer is about the same, and yeah, I mean, when we start talking about intuitivism, there it is.
It's a hard word to say.
And utilitarianism. I understand the values of both, but as a human individual, right, who has to make minute by minute decisions. Me personally, I can admit that I value the I word one more, where it's like, hey, I can give the gun one, right, or Judah comes over my house and he's trying to set my house on fire, and it turns out that it was full of termites, and it was going to cost me $20,000 to fix. But instead, I got insurance money for it, and I came up $40,000 extra. And you know what? Utilitarianism says that the results were beneficial to me, so thank you, and that made you a good friend. And again, I'm like, no, yeah.
That's the thing with these philosophies, is if you take either of them to their extreme, it's unworkable. It's
just
unworkable.
like anything,
So
just like communism.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Right.
And they do explore, they touch on some of those themes in the story too, right? With communism, with war. There's a lot of discussion about war throughout that whole thing. But Robo, you had a good question about if Watchmen took place today.
Oh yeah. So if Watchmen took place today, what do you think would be the replacement for the whole Cold War stuff. Like what Cold War doesn't really work for most of my son. If I said the Cold War, he'd be like, "Did that happen in Canada? I don't know. What is that?" Hopefully, his school will do better when we move. But what do you guys think? What do you guys think would be in place of the Cold War and the whole Soviet stuff? What if it were written today? What would we see?
Exactly what we're seeing right now.
Yeah. On a geopolitical level, I think it would still be Russians and Chinese and the U.S. because it's really those are the three power centers in the world in a nuclear sense. Although I think they could take it in some really interesting directions, more related to ideological politics, where a portion of the world is incredibly instead of capitalism and communism dividing the world right now. I think it's really fascism and progressivism.
That's
so
right.
I feel like that would be where the ideological divide would be. However, progressives and fascists don't necessarily have the means to obliterate each other in
Right.
nuclear hellfire yet. But yeah.
So as we're recording this video in the US, which is where you guys are,
And around the
typically,
world, in France,
And around the world.
it's spreading. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's riots happening everywhere. Primarily for this Black Lives Matter movement because
Yes.
there's just this entire in-your-face racism bullshit that's been happening and turning into this powder keg for the last however many years, hundreds of fucking years. Like, I keep telling people that slavery hasn't gone away, they've just rebranded it as incarceration. And Watchmen, the new series, which we'll talk about in another episode, does touch on like a lot of those themes of racism and stuff, right? It's still very timely and very relevant. And now all this shit is happening. I feel like that's exactly in the real world version, where we're headed. I'm surprised we haven't seen vigilantes yet that are like, trying to be Black Panther or trying to be, you know what I mean? Like walking the streets and doing that kind of I'm genuinely surprised it hasn't happened yet.
I think they
there
make
was
it...
there was a guy years ago. It was like back in I think it was like 2005. I remember seeing him on
tried to be a superhero.
Are you talking about out of Seattle?
Seattle. There's a street level superhero in Seattle, and he was like an MMA fighter. He wore a mask and he patrolled the streets. And they showed him on video like confronting drug dealers and like protecting women. And like this dude is.
What happened to him? Did he go to jail?
I think he's in jail for drug possession or something. Actually, or it was like assault of deadly weapon, or I mean,
I had no idea.
I think it's hard. I think when we look at kind of stuff, I got a couple buddies that have been to Afghanistan, and they go back as contractors, and I think it takes a certain kind of individual to want to actually walk the streets at night without the support.
Phoenix Jones,
exactly. Yeah.
I love that guy.
That it takes a certain individual for you to really just go out there and without the support, without being able to call back up, without, you know what I mean? Like I was saying with my friends who've gone over there to do contract work, without aircraft and satellites and all this stuff supporting you, and still go out there. Look, you better kill my parents and make me a billionaire and give me access to the world's top technologies if you want me out there fighting crime, because otherwise, Phoenix Jones out there, I don't know how he didn't die earlier. I don't know how some gang member didn't. Probably because he was in Seattle. Like he
got hit pretty hard. I mean, I used to follow him avidly. He'd come back from a patrol and he'd have like scars and wounds and bruises and shit, and like.
Cool.
Yeah, but here's the thing,
man.
Do you think he would have survived in DC, New York, or LA? I think some legit gangbanger would have put a bullet in his head way long ago. But Seattle,
and I think a lot of people would underestimate him. People underestimate Batman. People underestimate Daredevil. Like a lot of people would underestimate him. But that's what heroes do. That's what heroes do. They defy expectations.
You're so right. Phoenix Jones, Batman, Punisher. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
I hadn't even thought about it that way.
I'm convinced.
All right.
Can we get Phoenix? Can we get Phoenix on the show, please?
Yeah, when he gets done doing his prison time, let's do that.
No, let's do it in prison. That would be sick.
That would be dope. That would actually be pretty dope.
What a cool dude. Okay, I've got a question for you guys. so we talked about the show. The show has been well received. People like the show. You guys like the show, as far as I know.
I do.
But do you both like the Zack Snyder movie? Because that was pretty mixed, and so lots of people argue that the original comic book is unfilmable. So I want to know if you think it is possible to make well, if you liked the Zack Snyder.
It's not unfilmable. Like, nothing's unfilmable. You know what I mean? Like, that's absurd to
I
me.
like your attitude. Because I feel there are, like June, for example, I'm really worried about because there's some really crazy concepts in there that it's hard to get across without a novel format. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just how it's a matter of imagination.
Which one are you worried about?
June. Being adapted into a movie.
Okay.
Frank Herbert, yeah, the novel. Because it's been done 3 times or something now, and each one was terrible. But it's because
one was a made-for-TV movie with like really shitty special effects.
it might have been, made for TV.
We'll see. Maybe it is unfilmable, but I just don't. It doesn't jive with my sense of like, how could something be unfilmable? You know.
Right.
Who would make it? If someone was going to make it today, what would be your production team?
Not Zack Snyder. I found the Zack Snyder movie to be entertaining, but I felt like it was it just didn't even try to adapt thematically. Yeah, it had a lack of depth. Although it was fun to see almost panel by panel recreations of parts of the.
That was the part that I really. So I don't remember if we were recording or if we were just bullshitting as friends. My life is I can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not anymore. But we were talking about how sometimes, like, when you're watching some property, like, it's tainted by, oh, well, it wasn't as good as the book, or if I read the movie and then it's like, well, I tried to read the book and it just wasn't as good. All right, maybe that last one doesn't happen as often, but when I watched the actual Watchmen movie, I really did go in there completely with a blank slate. I knew it was a big book. I knew it was a comic book. I probably had flipped through it, but I never really actually read it. So I watched the Zack Snyder movie without having read the entire book, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. When I eventually read the book all the way through, I was like, what are people bitching about? You know, it's like you just said, Judah. It was like a shot for shot, panel for panel. Like, oh, look, and there he did that. And oh, look, they're having sex in the fog machine cloud thing, you know. I'm like, I don't know. I found it enjoyable.
More boobs in the movie than in the comic, which
is
100% point for the movie.
Yeah.
I didn't hate it. I would like to see Christopher Nolan direct a Watchmen adaptation.
I don't think he wouldn't have put the squid in there either. Like, look what he did with Bane. Like, I don't think he would have put the squid in there either. And if that's where the biggest people like, oh, there's no squid, it's like, well, I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody willing to do it.
So it wasn't the lack of squid that bothered me; it was the lack of that concept itself. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, he didn't even do. If it had been a fucking explosion, that'd be okay with that. You know what I mean? Like,
I've got a controversial idea. I think Tarantino should make a Watchmen film because hear me out. He's really good at capturing like time capsules in movies, right? Where he's like, it's this time and this music and this atmosphere.
And
like he's good at capturing
film grain.
That's it. Yeah. So I think he could do that like 1984 or whenever it's set, like setting really well, and he'd be really good at dialogue.
So does Samuel L. Jackson play the comedian, and does Uma Thurman play the Silk Spectre? And
yes, fuck yes.
Nice.
That would be sweet.
I'm there for it, and also Brad Pitt.
I actually want Samuel Jackson to play Adrian Veidt. I think that would be pretty awesome.
That would be
he's like,
just
look, motherfucker. I think I know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Well,
I'm the smartest motherfucker on the planet Earth, motherfucker.
If you watch Unbreakable and Glass,
that's basically what he is. Hey.
That's perfect. Like, if he played Adrian Veidt the way he played the guy in Unbreakable, I feel like that'd be spot on.
Yeah.
Yes. That would be sweet. Plus, he always wears purple, and Ozymandias has so much purple. That would be so dope.
You heard it here first, folks. Quentin Tarantino, hashtag Quentin Tarantino for Watchmen.
That's it. That's our pitch. All right. Next question for you boys. When the hero is harder to like than the villain, so let's say Rorschach is harder to like than Vite, what does that say about the world of Watchmen? We sort of touched on it earlier. What is Alan Moore trying to say when he makes his protagonist so unlikable?
I don't think Rorschach is harder to like than Vite. I think they're both equally hard to like, and they're both equally appealing in their own way. I think the world of Watchmen is really one of moral ambiguity, where no one's really good and no one's really bad. So it's kind of just a gray world where everything is this gray area.
No, I agree with you completely. I wouldn't even call him the hero. If we just go to, if I am going to be intuitive about it, if I am going to use my emotions about it, then if we look at Night Owl as the guy who maybe, although having the least impact, is the most magnanimous on why he's doing what he does, it's not hard for me. Last time we talked about this, I remember you guys saying something. We had this discussion with regard to, would this have worked in the first place, or is there anything we know? Like, is there any way we could have been convinced that this would have worked in the exact same way that Vite said, right? Like, what if the squid drops and killed 3 million people, and it causes complete chaos, and that starts the world wars? Russia and China look at that and go, they're weak, attack now. Like, there's just no way to know whether or not it would have been worth it. And
he asks Manhattan if he did the right thing. He was like, did I do the right thing? And we trust Manhattan's answer because he's God and he sees all futures. So it's kind of like the book telling us whether he did it right, but they didn't tell us. He goes, nothing is ever over. So what does that even tell you? You know what I mean?
It tells us
nothing.
It tells us one of the first panels of Doomsday Clock. That's what it tells us.
Yeah. That's actually a good segue. So, like, lots of people say that you can read Watchmen out of order because it's got those. We'll get on this in when we talk about the art, but like there are sections of comic within the comic, right, with the Black Freighter, and those aren't necessarily linear at times, and neither is the story at times. Like, does it have a distinct beginning, middle, and end? Can you read it in whichever order you like? What do you guys think about the storytelling?
Sounds like some Dark Side of Oz shit right there. Maybe. I haven't tried. I don't know. I haven't read any interview if that's intentional or not, but it would be cool if it's just something I haven't considered. What do you think, Robo?
I think if you could, here's what I'll say. I'm pretty skeptical about stuff like this sometimes, but I think if you could, I think it would be an exercise in you convincing yourself there's something there that probably isn't. I think that Alan Moore wrote it with the intent of having character arcs. I think there's a clear Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. And I think there's a conclusion and a plot twist. And I think it's meant to be read front to back.
Sounds about right.
That's my opinion.
Interesting.
But what if you start reading it at the same time that you hit play on Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon and they go together?
You're right. But is it backwards? I think if you play backwards, then you'll start seeing the Satan's message line up with
that would be
words.
amazing.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of occultish shit that Alan Moore would do. Like, he was so into. Does he consider himself Wiccan? He's got a lot of like Wiccan imagery throughout.
I
don't know.
I think a lot of people like that are more like aligned with the occult, where he might give an answer of, I don't know, I'm just spiritual. I'm not really.
You think he's like an Aleister Crowley type guy, or
potentially? Like, I'm sure that he's definitely done a lot of occult research, so he would know how to do like spells and summonings and that kind of shit. Which maybe that's where he gets his story ideas and characters and shit from. Who knows? Maybe he just summons them up and he's like, "Can I write about you?" Real quick?
I mean, he is of the age of people that would have admired that kind of. That was very trendy in like the early '80s, late '70s.
Yeah.
He does look like a wizard, to be fair.
He looks
like a wizard. So one interesting part of the story for me is how all the characters are essentially like pulled out of retirement. It kind of feels like Red and Red 2, if you guys ever saw those movies or comics. where I think it's like Bruce Willis, and it's like the same kind of idea where it's like they were the like prime, superhero peeps back in the day. They've like faded away into obscurity because society's like, you're kind of breaking the rules and you shouldn't be doing that shit. And there's all this other stuff going on, like the change in history. So the United States won the Vietnam War and the Watergate break-in was never exposed. And then World War III is kind of happening in 1985, or we're like stumbling towards it somewhat. But yeah, what do you guys think about the whole setup of like taking characters out of retirement? I just think that's so fascinating as a concept because you get all this history that you wouldn't get otherwise.
Yeah.
I feel like it adds this really layered, like.
It does, and it's cool. I feel like they beat it to death so much in Before Watchmen that it's like it lost some of its magic for me. But
Before.
yeah, it's.
Well,
what
was that?
So there was a series called Before Watchmen that was written as like a prequel.
You're saying it, but it's like I don't know. I can't really. It's coming off of. Are you farting into your mic directly?
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So it kind of ruins some of the magic, and I will never read Before Watchmen again, but I definitely will never read it as part of my Watchmen reading if I ever read Watchmen again.
And DC doesn't give a shit because they're already sitting on your shelf, so they're like, that's fine. And you did a show on it?
I spent so much goddamn money on this big fucking book. I'm not even gonna break it up.
My last question on the story before we start getting into the art is basically Alan Moore feels the same way that you guys do, where he's like, fuck all the adaptations. So do you think he's right? Like, how would you feel as a creator and a writer seeing your work?
It depends on what it is. It feels very emotionally attached to it, and but we would never have read it if DC and Vertigo didn't mass produce it. So, they're as much a part of it. They're curators, you know what I mean? So they're as much a part of bringing that thing to life as Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. At least for that time. Maybe nowadays it would be an Image title, and then he would retain the rights, and that'd be great. You know what I mean? And we'd never see any adaptations or an HBO show. But the fact of the matter is it is what it is, man. It's capitalism. So I don't think what he thinks really matters that much. You know what I mean? He could have just written it for himself, and then DC wouldn't be able to do anything with it. Yeah. So then it would be sitting on his shelf, and no one would have read it, and he'd be able to maintain his creative integrity. He chose to sign a deal. So when it comes to the art in Watchmen, I really like what David Gibbons did. It kind of like brings you back to like an old school comic aesthetic, but it's still very modern for the 80s. I like the color palette. I like how certain times it's all very red, especially when you're like on Mars. It's all very like pink and red, and those like basically like that castle thing that Dr. Manhattan builds.
With
very,
Dr. Manhattan
surreal.
being very blue in the middle of it all. It's pretty. Yeah,
Yes,
I like that. I like it.
The contrast, yeah.
Yeah.
So overall, I'd say it's pretty good. It did feel a little bit claustrophobic. I don't know. What did you guys think?
Robo, what'd you think? Did you like it?
Yeah, I mean, that was, there was something to the 9-panel that really just kind of, I think it was supposed to be structured in some sort of, it had to do with time or something. Everything just kind of goes in order. And then when you didn't see the 9-panel, or if they went away from it, then that's when you knew something was crazy was happening. There was a lot of books in Before Watchmen that kind of mimicked the 9-panel layout, and the ones that didn't, it was kind of, even aesthetically, it was kind of like, it almost upset you. It almost upset myself subconscious because I'm like, what are you doing? It doesn't even feel like the same story now for some reason. The panel did something. I would say I'm not like emotionally invested either way, but I like the way that it worked here.
Yeah. To me, it's just like probably everyone that's watching this has read it because it's such a famous, arguably the most famous comic book in the world. Mm-hmm. But it's 3 men in their prime. I said this last time, like creating at their best. But some of the videos that I've watched, like interviews with Alan Moore's around how that 9-panel grid came into play was Dave Gibbons was like, we need some, because the way that Alan Moore writes his scripts, you guys have probably seen the behind the scenes for everything he does. Super fucking detailed. Sometimes he can have 17 pages of description for one panel. it's like he goes so intense in research that sometimes Dave was like overwhelmed. So he's like, if I give you a 9-panel format and it's the same on every page, like I know sometimes they do full page spreads, but it's always that kind of like grid that it fits into, then we have some structure. Apparently it worked really well for all three of them because it gave them some sort of outline to follow. But I think it also helped with like the pacing, right? Because the start of each chapter, it starts from 12 minutes to midnight with the clock face on the cover, and then each one after that, it counts down a minute, right? Because we're getting closer and closer to Doomsday. But the 9-panel format kind of feels like a countdown in itself on each page. And so that pacing is really fun.
I get that, but like I was saying before, it's just claustrophobic, you know what I mean? It's teensy little panels, and it just feels really boxed in, so to speak. I mean, I've always been a less larger panels type of guy. Like that's what I prefer when I read comic books, because I like big pictures. I like prestige format, huge fucking picture in front of my face. That's where I get my jollies when I'm reading comics. Right. So I do have to kind of adjust my brain for teensy tiny little pictures with lots of little details.
At least give it every now and then. Like I understand the difference between not screenplay, but when you have a writer who has a lot to write, the less panels you have, the less space, the letterer and the people who's putting the layout has to put that story. So I get it, but I agree with Judah here. It's how strict they were to the 9-panel format kind of prevented them from giving us a lot of action shots, which I don't think really Alan Moore really cared about in the first place. So.
Because it wasn't really about that, was it? But one thing I did like, I thought the colorist John Higgins did an amazing job separating. So there's the comic within the comic, which is Black Freighter, and that is very, like, to me, dark, like almost black and white, like akin to the Walking Dead art that we were just talking about before, Judah, where it's like that real like gritty noir type feel. You still have that in the Watchmen, but there's a lot more color. So the separation of the two is really interesting. What did you think about the like comic within the insert?
It's cool looking.
Yeah.
I don't think narratively I found it a little bit distracting, but it was definitely cool looking. I like the fucked up pirate faces with their missing teeth and shit. I thought that was cool. And I like the overall aesthetic. That's about all I can say about it. I was not necessarily super drawn into the actual.
Did you say you found it boring as well, Robo?
Yeah. I mean, pretty much echoing what Judah said. Like, distracting, boring. But I do want to go a little further, and I can't wait to hear what you actually have to say about it, because you were talking about how you did have something to say about it. So I would love to have like Alan Moore sit here and go, because there's an assumption, right? And I am assuming here, but there's an assumption that there's something there that I'm supposed to get that I didn't get. And so what I would love is to have Alan Moore sit here and go, all right, check this out, and put me on his knee, and then I'll like have some warm milk, and then he flips the pages for me, and he's like, see here? See what he's doing? What's happening on the street in the background? Do you notice? And then I'm like, oh, I see. But I don't get it, and I don't know, maybe I'm stupid or whatever, but I don't get it.
So
that kind of brings us into the symbolism. Reed, did you have something?
Yeah, okay. I do have a lot, but I think the purpose of the Black Freighter, there's been a lot of discussion because Alan Moore is like consciously ambiguous. Like he makes it so that it's the death of the writer. You figure it out. You're the intellectuals. You figure it out. So to me, it's demonstrative of the powers of perception and the fallibility of man, right? So like the essence of the story itself is that a man is corrupted by circumstances, and then he blindly fights against innocence that he perceives to be mortal enemies, right? So like that to me is this whole mirror, and they do that throughout the entire story where they have panels that seemingly don't go together side by side because there's that, what do they call Rorschach? Sorry, the symmetry, fearful symmetry, right?
Right.
So there's all that throughout the entire thing, and they do that with, man, where should we start, Judah, with symbolism? Like there's the blood-stained smiley face, the doomsday clock, the nostalgia perfume.
Well, let's go there. Blood-stained smiley face. Like, what do you guys feel about that?
The comedian's badge. To me, it's like, it's indicative of a clock in that it's got the blood spatter in the same place that we start the hand, but it's also like this dichotomy again of the happy smiley face with a blood smudge on it.
With
You know,
blood,
like
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it. Like that's what it's exactly what it's supposed to symbolize.
Like the most innocent, joyful symbol of joy
That's
is a
it.
smiley face with fucking blood on it. So it's
Yeah.
like,
That's it.
yeah.
And the symbol of the 70s that next to the peace symbol was also like that peace, right? That peace, love, and happiness, right? Heart, peace symbol, and happiness, the smiley face. And those kind of 70s, 60s kind of counterculture symbols, but with blood on it. And so it's kind of like...
he's wearing it when he's fighting in the Vietnam War. So like,
Right.
what is that supposed to say?
Like Joker from A Full Metal Jacket, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And people have drawn parallels with that too. Like, we'll probably get some comments from people that are like, "Oh, I thought this character was inspired by this person," because you could draw so many, especially with Ozymandias. Like, some people have said that he's like Trump. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've even thought
Except
that
Ozymandias is way cooler, but yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So nostalgia perfume, that one's a bit on the nose.
Sure, yeah.
But like, but they are literally selling you bottle nostalgia, which is exactly what we all buy. Like, fuck, we're talking to the creator of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles this weekend, hopefully.
That's
and
right.
that's like, when did that come out? That's been around.
Definitely.
for
Shameless
so long.
plug is shameless. Now, when you look at that nostalgia perfume, just like you said with the Kevin Eastman interview we're gonna do later, is that a whole bowl of member berries?
Memberberry.
Yeah, like member. Does it actually? You think like that's like it's that same? My cat is really wanting love. The is it, is that what we're doing? We're selling nostalgia. We're selling and to where he makes his perfume to distract people, to just go here, just smell this and don't worry about anything that's really important out there. You
like
know
that
what I mean?
rocket launch that Trump did recently, right? The Distractix is what I call it.
Oh,
It's like
right. That's SpaceX. That's
like, look over
Elon
here.
Musk. Yeah. Don't worry about anything else. Doesn't this look cool?
And it could also be seen as meta commentary of we're Trojan horsing all these deep philosophical questions to these fans, using something familiar and comfortable like superhero comic books as the vehicle to basically smuggle this in with.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
And
funny,
tangentially, you could also argue that with, so when I was working at News Corp, one of the things I used to watch a lot was Trues by Russell Brand, where he like takes apart newspapers of the day. And, everyone that owns major publishers like Murdoch's, all that shit, they do this. They put really archaic symbolism in there. There's like the three things a woman can be: the virgin, the mother, or the whore. And there's versions of that throughout all the newspapers that subconsciously they're tapping into to just frame the conversation that you're having day by day. So there's power in it. And that's why Watchmen is so powerful to me, because there's so much visual symbolism that subconsciously you're absorbing, but you're not necessarily going like, oh, this upside down. Like, you're not like registering it, but it's there. You know what I mean? Like, it's sliding in with the message.
I wonder how much of that worked on me the first time I read it. I don't know, but I'd like to go back in time and observe myself, maybe through Dr. Manhattan's eyes, and see
cool.
like how much of those subtle cognitive subconscious messages actually impacted how I perceive things.
But then when you look at it, you change the outcome of it, and it both affected you and didn't affect you.
Didn't affect me, right?
Actually, that's a really deep philosophical question that I have for you both. You don't have to answer it now, but
when are we going to answer? What, like after the show?
Well,
I'm gonna both answer it and not answer it.
And not answer it.
Go.
That's it. Because they argue that so Watchmen is canon because it's on Earth. What is it, like 6142 or something nuts? And they basically said that's how it works, is because it's an alternate reality. So all realities theoretically are possible and happening at the same time. Does that make everything unimportant? Because essentially anything's happening anyway. So does that mean it doesn't matter?
Nothing's important. But
Shit, we got the nihilist here. Welcome.
it's not nihilism. It's not nihilism, because things can still be important to you. There are things that are important to me. They're just not inherently important. So that Watchmen universe is very important to the people that live in the Watchmen universe. It doesn't matter to us. And likewise, our reality and our experience are very important to us. It doesn't matter to them. So
I think you need some qualifiers when we say stuff like that, though. I don't disagree with you, but I would say nothing is universally important, or nothing is multi-universally important.
Right.
But yeah, like you said, within the universe of the Watchmen, and so that's the question, right? The question is, if there are multi-universes where all possibilities are allowed, right? Or if we say, that free will is a lie, or is anything matter anymore? I'm like, sure, everything matters to me. Like the things that matter to me still matter to me. Maybe not maybe not universally, and definitely not multi-universally. Does the me from another time care? But whether or not my son lives or dies tomorrow still matters to me.
And as far as inherent importance goes, which is importance that's outside, value that's outside of us, the only person in the Watchmen who can answer that question is Dr. Manhattan, because he's not emotionally tied to anything. That's really,
right.
except the Silk Spectre. Yeah.
Does my son invent cold fusion one day and solve world hunger and world? You know what I mean? Then, if whether or not he dies tomorrow has global and maybe even universal impacts on importance. And since I can't know that, then all I have to go on is my own emotional attachment to things. So yeah, I don't. We talk about this a lot, and while it's fun to look outside of big brain philosophical stuff, I'm more concerned with practical philosophy on daily life stuff. Even though it is fun to talk about other things like that.
So speaking of practical everyday life stuff, Rorschach's mask. Segue. So you guys have probably read this before. I don't know if you have, but I'm going to read it to you now. So his mask, which he refers to as his face, consisted of specialized fabric, one that was actually 2 layers of fabric with viscous black and white fluids trapped between them. The fluids remain in constant motion, being affected by heat and pressure. However, the black and white colors never combined to form gray. Very deliberate. Pretty cool, hey? So,
which would be a fault in an individual who is unable to see gray. If everything is black and white, you are good or bad, I have to kill you or not kill you, then you cannot. And I mean, I hate to bring it back to the relevancy, but I think that's what the problem that we see in Rorschach is the problem that we see in a lot of policing, where there's very little gray area. It's like, I have to show up, I have to do this thing, and boom, I must kill you now, or I have to do this move. And some of the better law enforcement officers are the people who are trained to have that gray area, to have that kind of de-escalation and stuff like that. So when we look in the comic book and we have Rorschach, I'm not saying I thought about this before now, because I'm really just not thinking of it just now. But when you said that they're not mixing to make gray, immediately it was like, that's the problem with Rorschach in general, that he doesn't see gray.
Yeah.
And yet it's still an ink blot test, which is an interesting juxtaposition there, because it's paradoxical that something that does not create gray, that only exists in black and white, is still so malleable to human interpretation. Sure. It's like, how could you have both of those things exist in the same space, where anyone who looks at it sees a different thing? That's right. But they cannot see any shades of gray. So
I am gonna shit on it a little bit and say, so he appears in Doomsday Clock, Rorschach, and so that series.
By the way, not as bad. We're gonna do a show on that.
Not him.
Oh, sorry.
Who?
It's not Rorschach. It's another.
Right. Which
okay, sure. But someone with his mask, and it morphs into, so his mask morphs into the DC Trinity symbol, right? Which I can send you guys a GIF of, so we can put it up in the video. But that to me is just like, it's the same thing that I felt when I was reading before Watchmen, where they've taken this like beautiful piece of art and they're like, how can we commercialize it?
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
But what else have we got? So Who Watches the Watchmen is always graffiti throughout, like the movies. Some of the, like, we talked about the Man of Steel and BVS.
Also relevant. Also relevant.
Yeah, very relevant. So the slogan is a reaction by the public to a lack of law enforcement protection during a national police labour strike, which is prior to the passage of the Keene Act, which is one of the major themes of the story. But it just keeps being, so it's in, is it in Spanish, they said in BVS? It's graffitied on the wall as well because they were trying to have some throwbacks to Watchmen. But what do you guys think the use of that slogan is? Like, what are they trying to say with that?
I don't really. To me, it's like
Jin is very unimpressed with Alan Moore. Let's hope we never get him to come on the show. He's like, look, man, you're not that deep.
Well, I think some of the stuff is deep. I just don't think Who Watches the Watchmen is particularly deep. It's pretty transparent what it means. Who keeps authority in check? You know what I mean? That's like stuff.
But it kind of falls in line with the rest of the narrative, right? We had Alex Packendell on, and he said,
nihilistic. I think he said like pessimistic.
Yeah, it's basically, it's like, hey, look, you have your heroes. We know that this is a view on heroes as you don't want to see them, right? As you might see them in the real world in some version. And so when we look at Who Watches the Watchmen, it's really kind of, I wonder if when you start looking at the Civil War storyline, it kind of goes into that. Like, when you have these people out here doing this stuff, when you have the Rorschachs and comedians of
Marvel's
the world.
Civil War.
Marvel's, yeah. Okay. What'd I say?
Because at first I thought you were talking about the actual American Civil War. I didn't realize you.
Fair. And, Gettysburg and all that. Who watches the Watchmen? No, you're right. I was not clear. I don't know. You're right. It's not super deep. No one's going to read that and go, I get it.
I truly believe that a lot of people need to think that more, because I think one of the things that's still wrong with our society today is people do not take the time to question information and where it comes from. And that they are so easily manipulated by social media and the sway of their peers. It's ridiculous when you have this device at hand that can fact check literally anything. And I know, like, you could argue and say Google's on side and they're evil, but there's more search engines out there than Google. There's other avenues for you to explore. There's like so much information out there and people refuse to access it.
Yeah. Well, we do it. We've all done this, I'm sure. I mean, I know I've done it. Maybe you guys have never done it, but people look through news, they see a news article, they open it up, they do a quick scan, and what they're thinking is, does this align with my side of the political spectrum? Oh, yeah, it kind of does reinforce my side. I like this. This is news, and this is what I accept as fact. Or, this seems to be supportive of the other side of the political spectrum that I don't like. This is obviously fake, and it's fake news. And that's kind of I'd say that's the depth that most people use to vet their sources. We give these people a lot of trust, and we kind of really surrender to them to basically tell us what's real and what isn't. And everyone's very smug about, just do enough research, you know what I mean? But where does research come from? It comes from other people we don't know. It's always coming from other people we don't know. It's easy for me to sit here and I discount things all the time. All the time I'm like, that's fucking fake or it's not real. But even the shit that I do believe, how real can it? How do I even know what's real? And
that's right.
That's really like Ryu was saying. Yeah, like where's the watchdog group that keeps those people honest? It doesn't exist.
Who watches the Watchmen that watch the Watchmen?
Here's the only problem. Exactly. And then we start getting into this whole this infinite thing. What's that one that pattern called in math where it just kind of becomes infinitely smaller?
Fibonacci.
Yes, that's it. And so and here's the deal though. Yes, that is correct. The media is controlled by powerful people. Confirmation bias is a real thing. I get it. There's a difference between acknowledging that and using that to be intellectually lazy. There's a difference between acknowledging that and then also doing this stupid fucking false equivocation, especially today, to say that, they both kind of fucked up. I'm like, no, dude, you need to pick a fucking side.
And I'm not.
Yeah, I mean,
to some form of reality.
There, and I don't want to. I forget it. I don't want to. What is it? Godwin's law. I don't want to do that. But I will say, everyone at some point is going to reach a point in their lives where they got to go, this is right and this is wrong, and I have to stand here. and sometimes the opposition is also going to be a piece of shit. The example I like to use recently is that you have Nike commercials playing Kaepernick's deal, or you have the Target just now recently putting out the statement saying that we stand with Black Lives Matter as their targets are getting burned down, right? And so then people share it. I shared it, happy face, right? I shared it, and it's good. But then people, rightfully, I would say, correctly even, go, do you think they really give a shit? Or is that a corporate HR move? And I say,
corporate HR move.
and I say, corporate HR move, exactly, but good. Like I am being
Better
forced.
than not doing it.
We are living in a society where corporate HR has to make a decision on how we're going to go forward. And you know what corporations understand? Hey, motherfucker, if you want to succeed, what can go broke? Bullshit. All the marketing evidence and all the marketing products prove that is a lie. Because if it was get woke and go broke, billionaire corporations that hire these marketing firms would not be going woke. They would say, fuck you, like they did in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s, in the 40s. They would say, fuck you.
They know their audience.
But it's 2020, and you better fucking support Kaepernick, and you better support Black Lives Matter, and I think most people need to pick a side.
So that's on an ideological sense, and I agree. I think you do have to pick a side in an ideological sense. But you could live in one generation where they tell you smoking's okay, and what do you know? You haven't seen the research. The people that are supposed to know more than you, that have more money, are telling you that smoking's okay, and then 10 years later, they're telling you smoking will give you cancer and you're going to die. And it's like, what is the smoking is okay of now that we're going to find out 10, 20 years from now was a lie? You know what I mean?
What is important is, so that one, so I won't go off on a long one on this, but that is facts. But I will tell you another thing that people use examples, not you, but people use examples like that, again, to say, and I know you're not, but I'm just saying some people say they use that as a reason to believe whatever they want to believe. When smoking said that smoking was bad, when there was that time where smoking said that was not bad and it was safe, and we moved to smoking was bad. Why? Who came out and said it? My favorite politician, my pastor in church, my buddy who runs a watch group on conspiracy theories? No, other experts based off evidence. So I'm not doing that evidence. I'm not doing that research. I get it, but I have to trust somebody, and so I'm going to trust the experts based off evidence. And then that's when you got to be educated enough to go, who's doing this?
And I think there's, maybe I'm miscommunicating. I'm not saying never believe anything, because you got to, like you said, you have
I know
to.
you're not saying that. I'm just saying that people mimic that and they twist it for their own version.
If you're asking these questions in an intellectually honest sense, which I think all three of us definitely are, it's still a little bit concerning that at the end of the day we still have to trust somebody. At the end of the day, we still have to trust somebody, and
Kids trust their parents about Santa Claus every day. Just to be told you're fucking wrong from the beginning. We teach you.
In the who watches the Watchmen sense, it definitely feels like there's not enough people, or there's not. I mean, again, it's an endless Fibonacci's who watches the people who watch the news, who people watch the people who watch the people. Eventually you do have to trust somebody. It just feels like we're trusting too many people with too little oversight.
It definitely. You have to decide. You got to weight it, right? Everything is weighted, and you have to decide, what am I going to trust somebody in? And so, am I going to trust you to say, hey, believe me, dropping this psychic explosion squid thing is going to be a good thing? No, I'm not going to trust you. Here's my research. Don't smoke anymore. No, go ahead.
Question. Another crazy existential question for you. Where'd you get that hoodie?
Well, how do we even know I have a hoodie? How do we know I'm here?
Is the hoodie real?
Go to Teespring, look for IFLC swag and stuff. One day, you might even see it on our website.
That's me. It's me. Look at that, guys. Sorry.
But yeah, we're gonna have everything out there. We have sweatshirts. We have a quote by a very famous individual that we were given permission to actually print out, and it has something to do with not one. There's not a child alive that. What is it?
There's not a single 10-year-old child that I don't feel confident I could beat up.
Yeah,
And it's not that I'm going around beating up children. It's
but
that
you could if you wanted to.
there's no 10-year-old. So I was thinking it's about superhero sidekicks that are 10, and I believe I could beat the fuck out of all of them, even Damian Wayne.
Yeah, as an example,
shit.
that shirt is not about Damian Wayne specifically. It's just in general. We also have another one. 2020 is kind of crazy. We have another one that says, I survived Ragnarok 2020, because I'm pretty sure we're in Ragnarok right now. So it's a little
Surtur's
early.
about to blast out of the ground.
It's a little early, so if you have hope, buy it, and then you can wear it in 2021. But yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on. Hey guys, that concludes the main body of our Watchmen breakdown. We do have more coming up, but we also have a lot on our plate with Kieran Gillen coming on the show here in a little bit. We mentioned Kevin Eastman. He's coming up. Tina Horn's going to come back up on the show. If you follow us on at Patreon /IFreakinLoveComics, Ree's going to host a show with Tina Horn about sex positivity and kink in comics. We're going to record that on the 21st, so we'll post that on Patreon. Can't post it on YouTube because it's going to be completely uncensored and explicit, so it's going to be great. All that to say... all that to say that the Watchmen that we have, we still plan to do a breakdown of HBO's Watchmen, and then finally Doomsday Clock. What were you gonna say, Judah?
Fuck yeah.
Finally some
Oh,
good shit.
I was just gonna make a encouraging noise, like a fuck yeah, you know.
Fuck yeah! And we're gonna close it with some finger guns.
Please like, subscribe, ring the bell, and be free. Follow our links and watch our show because you want to and not because of the threats. Thank you for watching Judah, Robo, and Ree. We talk about comics, movies, and TV. Sometimes we have notable guests, and sometimes it's just us. But we're also cool.